Hawthorne Lux Hotel, New York. A chilly November evening, yet inside the grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Lux Hotel, the atmosphere was the complete opposite. Warm, vibrant, and filled with an indescribable excitement. The crystal chandeliers shimmered, casting golden light over dazzling evening gowns, glittering champagne glasses, and powerful businessmen exchanging handshakes worth millions. At the center of it all stood Nathaniel Hawthorne, CEO of the country's most prestigious luxury hotel empire. As he stepped onto the stage, clad in a flawless black Armani suit, not a single crease in sight, every movement exuded authority. He was a man accustomed to power, to control, to ensuring everything in his world was perfectly aligned. But amidst the carefully curated grandeur, one presence stood out: Catherine Sinclair. She wasn't dressed in the understated black worn by most female journalists. Instead, she had chosen an elegant emerald green silk dress, hugging her curves with effortless grace, yet remaining tastefully refined. Her chestnut brown hair cascaded in soft waves, framing a face that was sharp, perceptive. Her stormy gray eyes gleamed with amusement as she surveyed the room like a hunter assessing her prey. Catherine Sinclair didn't write dull articles about the secrets to a billionaire's success. She uncovered the truth. She exposed the hidden cracks beneath the pristine facades of corporate empires. And tonight, her target was none other than Nathaniel Hawthorne. From the shadows of the ballroom, she watched as he took the stage, addressing the press with a voice as composed as his expression. Every word was precise, measured, leaving no room for misinterpretation. But Catherine wasn't listening for his words. She was watching for the cracks. And there it was, just for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something behind his controlled gaze, a detail so small that no one else would have caught it. She took a slow sip of champagne, her lips curving into a knowing smirk. The game had begun. The post-press conference cocktail party was an extravagant affair. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over silk-covered tables, where glasses of champagne shimmered under the soft light. Business moguls, politicians, and power players clustered in quiet circles, exchanging deals worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Deals that would never make it onto the front page. But Catherine Sinclair wasn't mingling with the crowd. She stood near the bar, a glass of wine in hand, her sharp gaze sweeping across the room like a hunter, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then she saw him. Nathaniel Hawthorne had just concluded a conversation with a high-profile investor, his expression as composed as ever, as if he had anticipated every outcome before the night even began. But the moment Catherine stepped toward him, his storm-gray eyes flickered in her direction, not with surprise, but with recognition. She didn't waste time. "You hate the press, so why hold a press conference?" Her voice was light, almost casual, but laced with unmistakable provocation. Nathaniel turned to face her, his gaze sharp but unreadable. "I don't hate the press. I only hate inaccurate reporting." His voice was deep, steady, utterly controlled. Catherine took a slow sip of her wine, a knowing smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Good, because I only write the truth." A brief silence stretched between them. She saw it in his eyes. The subtle shift, the quiet assessment. He wasn't irritated, he wasn't defensive, he was curious. And that intrigued her more than anything else. Nathaniel tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth hinting at a smirk. "Then I look forward to reading your article." Catherine let out a soft chuckle, swirling the wine in her glass. "Good, because I promise it'll be an interesting read." The game of wits could have gone on for hours, but Catherine knew the real battle was only just beginning. Catherine Sinclair had no intention of staying long, but she couldn't deny one thing. Her exchange with Nathaniel Hawthorne had intrigued her more than any story she had ever pursued. After their brief but charged conversation, she returned to the bar, sipping her drink slowly, her mind still analyzing every subtle reaction he had given her. Across the room, Nathaniel was watching her too. He wasn't the kind of man easily rattled by sharp eyes or a well-placed remark. He had faced countless people who had tried to probe, challenge, or manipulate him. But Catherine was different. She wasn't in a rush. She wasn't trying to gain his favor. Instead, she was studying him, as if she were already predicting his next move. She didn't have to wait long. Nathaniel broke away from the crowd and walked toward her, whiskey in hand. His voice was smooth, effortlessly confident as he spoke, just as she was taking another sip of champagne. "Do journalists not have working hours?" Catherine turned, her lips curving slightly. "And what about CEOs? Shouldn't you be busy reviewing revenue reports instead of standing here arguing with me?" Nathaniel laughed, a real laugh, not the polite, calculated one reporters usually captured, and that alone made Catherine even more intrigued. Their conversation continued, each sentence a carefully played move. From the hotel industry to the absurdities of high society, no topic was off limits. When Catherine mocked wealthy businessmen for owning 6 identical suits just to maintain a sense of perfection, Nathaniel merely arched a brow, amusement flickering in his gaze. "Maybe I own 6 identical suits," he mused. Catherine propped her elbow on the bar, her expression teasing. "Then tell me, don't you think perfection can be a little boring?" Nathaniel took a slow sip of whiskey, his voice even. "Not when it belongs to someone who knows how to use it." Catherine chuckled, but this time she couldn't deny one thing. Nathaniel Hawthorne was not like the men she had met before. 1 drink, then 2, then 3. Words turned into challenges, glances into silent invitations. By the time the 5th cocktail arrived in front of her, Catherine felt the edges of the night blur, but she still remembered his eyes, steady and unreadable, watching her like he had been waiting for this moment all along. That night, they crossed a line, and Catherine wasn't entirely sure who had really won this game. The early morning light filtered through the thick curtains, casting a soft golden glow across the pristine white sheets. Catherine Sinclair stirred slightly, her head heavy from the effects of too much wine the night before. But just as she was about to pull the covers over her head and drift back into sleep, something felt off. The bed was too soft. Not hers. The scent lingering in the air was different too. It wasn't the familiar aroma of morning coffee in her apartment. It was something richer, warmer, sandalwood, mixed with something undeniably masculine. Her eyes snapped open, and then she saw him. Nathaniel Hawthorne. He lay beside her, one arm draped lazily over the sheets, his dark hair slightly tousled, yet still annoyingly perfect. Catherine held her breath, her gaze flickering across the vast hotel suite. A green dress draped over a chair, high heels discarded near the door, a silk tie wrapped around the armrest of a chair. Fragments of last night surfaced, a knowing smirk, low laughter against her skin, heated whispers in the dark. Damn it. Catherine wasn't the kind of woman who panicked, but as she glanced at the man sleeping beside her, flawless, untouchable, something inside her shifted. But she also wasn't the kind to get tangled up with a powerful CEO like Nathaniel Hawthorne. She needed to leave before this turned into something far more complicated. Without a sound, she slipped out of bed, finding her dress and sliding it on in one swift motion. Her purse was resting on a nearby table, and just as she reached for it, she hesitated. A notepad and pen sat beside it. 1 second later, she put the pen down, leaving behind a short, unapologetic message. "Thanks for a fun night." No flowery words, no lingering ties. She smoothed out her dress, fixed her hair, and without another glance back, slipped out the door, closing it behind her without a sound. Nathaniel Hawthorne hated mornings. They always arrived too early, too bright, and dragged in endless meetings. But today, something was worse than the morning itself. She was gone. He groggily opened his eyes, his head still heavy from last night's whiskey. As he turned over, he expected to find warm, tangled sheets, the presence of the woman who had intrigued him far more than he wanted to admit. Instead, there was only empty space. And a note. Nathaniel picked it up, scanning over the 8 words. Short, dismissive, laced with defiance. "Thanks for a fun night." Leaning back against the headboard, he ran a hand through his hair, the other gripping the note. For the first time in his life, he was the one left behind. Women never walked away first, and yet, She had disappeared as if last night had meant absolutely nothing. A slow smirk tugged at his lips, amusement flickering in his stormy gaze. "Catherine Sinclair, do you really think you can just walk away?" Nathaniel Hawthorne didn't like losing, and that only made him want to see her even more. Catherine Sinclair had no intention of seeing Nathaniel Hawthorne again. But fate, or more accurately, Nathaniel himself, had other plans. That evening, she attended one of New York's most exclusive charity galas, a place where the elite spent hundreds of thousands on art, wine, or luxury vacations just to flaunt their wealth. Catherine wasn't there to enjoy it. She was there to observe, to catch the details others missed. And then she saw him. Nathaniel stood in the center of the room, effortlessly commanding attention. In a crisp black tuxedo, he looked every bit the king among his court. His eyes met hers for just a second, a knowing look, as if he had been expecting her. Catherine was about to turn away, but at that moment the event host stepped onto the stage, announcing one of the night's most exciting auction items. Ladies and gentlemen, up next, an exclusive luxury trip to Italy. Private jet travel, 5-star accommodations, exquisite dining with Michelin-starred chefs, and exclusive access to some of the world's most luxurious resorts. Bidding starts at $50,000. Catherine barely paid attention until she heard a calm, unwavering voice cut through the room. 250,000. She whipped around. "Nathaniel, what the hell?" The entire ballroom fell silent. No one dared to outbid him. 250,000, going once, going twice. Sold to Mr. Nathaniel Hawthorne. Applause erupted. Nathaniel smiled, a slow, deliberate smirk, his eyes locked onto Catherine's. And then the host added one final line. And as per tradition, the winner must now announce who they'll be taking on this exclusive getaway. A terrible feeling settled in Catherine's stomach. Nathaniel casually set his drink down before picking up the microphone. "I believe this trip would be far more interesting with Catherine Sinclair. And if she refuses, well, she does love a challenge, doesn't she?" The room erupted in murmurs. Catherine nearly dropped her champagne. Nathaniel's gaze never wavered. Sharp, unreadable, but holding the slightest hint of amusement. He had just forced her into going. Catherine gripped her glass tighter, inhaling deeply. "All right, Nathaniel, you want to play? Let's play." 3 days later, a private jet touched down in Florence, Italy. Catherine stepped off the aircraft, the warm Italian breeze brushing against her skin as golden sunlight bathed the historic city. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that she wasn't here by choice. Nathaniel Hawthorne followed right behind her, effortlessly composed, as if this were just another routine business trip. When their eyes met, he smirked. "Welcome to Italy, Catherine." She tightened her grip on her bag. "Don't expect a thank you just yet." Nathaniel didn't need to say a word. With effortless control, he led her to the waiting limousine, leaving her no room to argue. Catherine didn't like this feeling. She didn't like how smoothly Nathaniel manipulated situations, never outright forcing her, yet never giving her an easy way out either. But she had no intention of letting him win this game so easily. That evening, they sat at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Florence, city lights twinkling against the deep red of their wine glasses. Catherine leaned back, swirling her wine as she watched Nathaniel. "So, tell me, what do you really want from me?" Nathaniel set his glass down, tracing a finger along the rim. "I think you already know the answer." She raised an eyebrow. "I want to hear you say it." Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp but unhurried. "I enjoy this game, Catherine, but I don't play for fun. I play to win." Her heartbeat faltered, not from fear, but because she knew exactly what he meant. The tension between them was electric, charged with an unspoken challenge, a danger neither of them could ignore. And she knew, after tonight, she was no longer just an observer. She was officially in the game. Catherine didn't know exactly when things spiraled out of control. Maybe it was their first night in Florence when Nathaniel took her to an exclusive private gathering of financial elites, where billion-dollar deals were sealed over nothing more than a handshake and a glass of wine. Or maybe it was the next afternoon when they left Florence for Venice, where Nathaniel had arranged a private gondola ride along the Grand Canal. Catherine had scoffed. "Really? A CEO like you does romance?" Nathaniel had merely tilted his head, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Maybe I just want to see how long you can resist." At the time, she never thought she would fall. But in that moment, as the Venice sunset painted the sky in shades of crimson, as Nathaniel reached out to brush a stray strand of hair from her face, as he looked at her with an intensity that was no longer part of their game, Catherine knew. She had gone too far. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to go back. Catherine Sinclair didn't believe in promises. She had built her entire career on exposing illusions, on proving that fairy tale romances were nothing more than scripted lies. Men like Nathaniel Hawthorne, rich, powerful, dangerous, weren't the kind of men who loved. And yet here she was, standing in one of the most romantic cities in the world, facing the one man she had sworn never to fall for. And he was kneeling in front of her. It all started at a charity auction in Milan, their final stop on this trip. The evening was extravagant, filled with sky-high bids, luxury wines, and powerful elites pretending to care about philanthropy when all they really wanted was to assert their status. Catherine wasn't surprised. This was the world she knew all too well. But then, a special auction item was introduced. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our final item of the night. An exquisite blue diamond ring, a one-of-a-color design crafted by one of Italy's finest artisans. The starting bid, $200,000. Catherine paid no attention until she heard a deep, decisive voice cut through the room. 500,000. Her head snapped up. "Nathaniel, what the hell?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, all eyes turning toward him in curiosity. Even the auctioneer seemed momentarily stunned at the immediate double bid. No one dared to outbid him. 500,000 going once, going twice. "Sold to Mr. Nathaniel Hawthorne." Applause erupted. Nathaniel smiled, as if he had planned this all along. Catherine crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. "What exactly do you plan to do with that ring? It doesn't suit you." Nathaniel lifted his wine glass, his gray bouleau eyes gleaming with something unreadable. "Who said it was for me?" A sinking feeling crept up Catherine's spine. And before she could react, Nathaniel dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of the gala, under the stunned gazes of hundreds of guests. The entire room fell silent. Nathaniel opened a velvet box, revealing the breathtaking blue diamond ring. The light reflected off the gemstone, illuminating the composed yet determined look on his face as he gazed up at her. "Catherine Sinclair, will you marry me?" Catherine completely froze, her heartbeat slammed against her ribs. Was this a joke? Another one of his power moves? Or was it something far more dangerous? Something real? A trap so sophisticated she hadn't even seen it coming. But when she looked into Nathaniel's eyes, she didn't see calculation. She didn't see a man playing a game of strategy. She saw a man who genuinely wanted her. And for the first time in her life, Catherine didn't know what to do. Catherine didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wasn't sure if she had the courage to say it. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, hundreds of eyes fixed on her, waiting for the reaction of Catherine Sinclair, the journalist who always had an answer for everything, but right now she didn't. Nathaniel Hawthorne remained on one knee, composed, yet his gaze was no longer that of a man playing a game. Catherine inhaled sharply, trying to steady the erratic rhythm of her heart. She could say no. She could walk away, return to her life, continue being the independent journalist who belonged to no one. But did she really want to? Nathaniel had never been like any man she had met before. He didn't fear her sharp wit. He never dodged her difficult questions, and most importantly, he never once tried to change her. It was almost unsettling to realize that, of all the people she had known, Nathaniel Hawthorne might be the one who understood her best. Are you sure? Her voice finally broke the silence, soft yet weighty. Nathaniel arched a brow. What do you mean? She held his gaze. Are you sure you want to marry someone who will never submit to you? Someone who will keep digging for the truth, keep questioning, keep challenging you? Nathaniel let out a quiet laugh, as if the question amused him rather than concerned him. I don't want someone who submits, Catherine. I want someone who stands beside me. Her heart skipped a beat, not because his words were sweet or poetic, but because she believed them. And so, in the middle of a grand gala, under the stunned gazes of the elite, Catherine Sinclair nodded. Nathaniel smiled then, a real smile, unguarded and genuine. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close, whispering against her lips before they finally met. Welcome to the real game.